Aretha's actually one of my idols, along with others like Etta James and Janis Joplin.
A 13-year-old Courtney Hadwin walked onto the America's Got Talent stage in 2018 looking so nervous she could barely meet the judges' eyes. Then the music started, and the shy girl from County Durham suddenly sounded like someone decades older. Simon Cowell was stunned. Howie Mandel reached for the golden buzzer. Millions watched the audition, and Courtney looked destined for superstardom. Instead, her path took a far darker turn, involving creative battles, anxiety, a serious vocal injury, and rumors that spread far beyond reality. So what happened to Courtney Hadwin after that unforgettable audition? Join us as we uncover her story. The shy girl from Hesleden. Hesleden is a village in County Durham in the northeast of England, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody and nothing particularly dramatic ever happens. Courtney Hadwin grew up there with her parents, Paul and Anne-Marie, and from the outside, her childhood looked ordinary enough. Inside it, she was dealing with something that made ordinary life almost impossible. As a child, Courtney suffered from debilitating social anxiety. She spoke fewer than 100 words a year to people outside her family, and often hid in closets at school to avoid interaction. She was a child whose nervous system treated other people as threats, and the closets at school were the solution she found when the anxiety became too much to manage in plain sight. Her singing voice was the one place none of that applied. On a stage, with music, something switched in her brain, and the girl who could not speak to strangers became someone who commanded every room she entered. Her grandfather Bill noticed it first, and what he did about it is one of the most touching details in her entire story. Her grandfather spent his entire pension, over £8,000, and drove thousands of miles to take her to auditions, while her parents took out loans to fund the same pursuit. She competed on The Voice Kids UK in 2017 and made the finals before being eliminated. The UK industry did not know exactly what to do with her. Her sound was raw and bluesy and channeled Janis Joplin and Tina Turner in a way that felt simultaneously ancient and completely original. And British talent television in 2017 was not particularly built to accommodate that. Her family made a decision that would change everything. They believed American audiences would better appreciate her unique style and took her across the Atlantic to audition for America's Got Talent Season 13 in 2018. The audition that followed is genuinely one of the most extraordinary moments in the show's history. Not because of the voice alone, which was extraordinary, but because of the contrast. The child at the microphone before the music started was so visibly terrified that the judges were already bracing themselves for something painful. What they got instead was the moment that Howie Mandel's hand found the golden buzzer, and the moment that changed Courtney Hadwin's life in ways she could not have imagined and was not prepared for. So what was it specifically about that performance that stopped a room cold? And what did that kind of viral explosion do to a 13-year-old with severe social anxiety? The contract that should have been a dream. The AGT audition video hit 200 million views before Courtney even performed live on the show's first broadcast of the season. Tyra Banks announced that number to the audience as she introduced Courtney for her second appearance. And the weight of what that meant for a 13-year-old who could not make eye contact with strangers was something nobody at the production seemed particularly concerned about. Her audition performance of Otis Redding's Hard to Handle had done something that most viral moments do not. It made people feel as if they had discovered something genuinely rare. The internet's reaction was not the usual cycle of brief enthusiasm followed by fast forgetting. It was sustained, with people sending it to other people with explanations of why it mattered. That is a different kind of cultural moment. She made it through to the finals of season 13, performing Tina Turner's River Deep Mountain High in the live shows, and finished in 6th place, a result that Simon Cowell himself described as a shock, given that what Courtney was doing on that stage was objectively more remarkable than what most of the acts ahead of her could produce. Her success on America's Got Talent culminated in her signing a record deal with Syco Entertainment and Arista Records in 2018, and the deal looked, from the outside, like the destination every young artist in that situation would dream of. Simon Cowell's label, one of the biggest record companies in the world. A platform built directly on the audience that had already declared itself obsessed with her. What Courtney found inside that deal was something considerably different from what the paperwork implied. She felt creatively stifled almost immediately, pushed by the label toward pop music that had nothing to do with the blues and rock roots that had made her distinctive in the first place. The raw, howling quality that had stopped 200 million people mid-scroll was exactly the thing the label seemed most interested in smoothing away. The Courtney Hadwin that the world had fallen in love with, and the Courtney Hadwin that the label wanted to manufacture, were not the same person. She released the Cover Sessions album in 2019, recording songs by Harry Styles, Lil Nas X, the Jonas Brothers, and others, content that was commercially sensible and creatively hollow for someone with her gifts. She appeared on America's Got Talent, The Champions, in 2019, performing her first original song, Pretty Little Thing, which gave a glimpse of what she was actually capable of when left to her own devices. Then 2020 arrived, and everything that had already been difficult became catastrophic. What exactly happened when the label collapsed, and why did Courtney find out about it the same way strangers on the internet did? What the pandemic did to her mind. In 2020, Syco Music shut down. The label that Simon Cowell had built over decades, the label that had signed One Direction, Little Mix, and Susan Boyle, the label that had signed Courtney Hadwin after the golden buzzer moment with the implied promise of everything, closed. For most adults with industry experience, proper management, and legal representation, a label shutdown is devastating but navigable. You have relationships, you have options, you have people who know how to move from one structure to another. Courtney found out through the news that the label had shut down, leaving her career in limbo. She was 15 years old. She had given her family's savings, her grandfather's pension, her entire early adolescence, and the emotional cost of performing under the most intense scrutiny imaginable to a career that a media headline informed her was no longer being supported by the institution that had promised to protect it. The creative suppression she had felt during the label period was one kind of damage. Finding out this way was also humiliating. And then the pandemic arrived and locked her inside with all of it. During the pandemic, Courtney developed agoraphobia, unable to leave her house for 3 months due to crippling panic. The social anxiety that had made her childhood so difficult, the same condition she had been managing since before her family first took her to an audition, the same thing that hid her in school closets, found in the pandemic a perfect external justification to become something more acute and more governing. The desperation and anger she has described channeling into her music during her darkest periods found their raw material in this stretch. The label betrayal, the pandemic isolation, the agoraphobia, the 16-year-old alone in County Durham trying to figure out whether the thing she had sacrificed everything for was still available to her. Her original song Monsters was born directly from this period, and the title is not metaphorical. The monsters were real, they were internal, and they were winning for a while. Courtney's management situation during this period was itself unstable, with a later stint at MN2S Management in 2024 ending due to a lack of gigs before she eventually found stability with Oliver Mojeda at Total Artist Management, a series of institutional failures that extended the period of uncertainty well past what any reasonable person could call a temporary setback. So she survived the label collapse and the pandemic and the agoraphobia, and then in early 2025, her own body turned on her in the most targeted and cruel way possible. The death rumors and months of enforced silence. A vocal hemorrhage is exactly what it sounds like: bleeding in the vocal cords. For most people, it is painful and alarming. For a professional singer whose entire identity and entire capacity to process the world runs through her voice, it is something closer to an existential crisis. In early 2025, Courtney suffered a vocal hemorrhage that required months of total silence. The treatment for a vocal hemorrhage requires the cords to be completely rested, which means no singing, minimal speaking, and the patient management of a recovery timeline that is entirely outside the patient's control. For Courtney, a person whose relationship with the external world is already mediated through anxiety and whose primary coping mechanism and primary source of identity is her voice, enforced silence of that duration was a kind of suffering that most people would struggle to fully comprehend. The internet, not knowing what had happened, but noticing her absence from social media and from public appearances, generated its own explanation. Viral rumors spread claiming that Courtney Hadwin had died in a car crash. The rumors spread far enough and fast enough that they became their own news cycle, with fans who had followed her since the AGT audition genuinely believing they were grieving. She eventually addressed the death rumors directly after her recovery, confirming she was alive and setting the record straight about what had actually happened. But the months between the hemorrhage and that response were months during which a portion of the internet had moved on from believing she was alive. For someone who already struggled with the gap between her public persona and her private experience of anxiety, watching the world respond to a false report of her death while she was physically unable to correct it is the kind of experience that leaves marks. The forced silence during the hemorrhage recovery also produced something unexpected. Without the ability to perform or record, Courtney sat with her experiences in a way that the constant movement of her career had previously prevented. The months of quiet became the creative foundation for the most honest and personal work of her life. A debut album that said everything the label years had suppressed, in the voice that the hemorrhage had temporarily taken and eventually returned. What did she make of all that silence? And was the music that came out of it worth everything it had cost? The album that finally said everything. After the label years, the pandemic, the agoraphobia, and the hemorrhage, Courtney Hadwin did something that most artists in her position do not manage because the fear of getting it wrong again is too great. She bet on herself. She moved away from the major label world entirely, signing to an independent imprint called You Only Love Me that gave her complete creative control over her sound, her image, and her output. And she started making the music that she had always been capable of making when nobody was redirecting her towards something more commercially convenient. The contrast between what Psycho had been steering her toward and what she began producing independently was different enough that it felt like meeting the real Courtney Hadwin for the first time. Blues-inflected, raw, emotionally direct, rooted in the rock and soul tradition that had always been her actual musical home. Songs like Monsters, written from inside the darkest period of her life, and Die and Stay Pretty, which addressed addiction's impact on relationships with the kind of narrative specificity that only comes from genuine observation rather than commercial calculation. The independent trajectory built gradually. She released singles, rebuilt her social media presence, toured in capacities that matched her actual current reach, rather than the phantom superstar status the label had implied was imminent, and reconnected with an audience that had been waiting through years of quietness and uncertainty. By 2024, she had amassed over 1.8 million Instagram followers and was teasing the debut album that would become the statement of everything the previous years had been building toward. Then came Carnegie Hall. In April 2024, Courtney Hadwin performed at the New York Pop's 41st birthday gala honoring Clive Davis at Carnegie Hall, one of the most prestigious musical venues in the world, as part of a tribute to one of the most significant figures in the history of recorded music. The 13-year-old from Hesleden, who had hidden in school closets because other people terrified her, was on the Carnegie Hall stage. That is the full distance of how far she had traveled. Her debut album, Little Miss Jagged, was released in September 2025, and the response confirmed everything the years of independent work had been pointing toward. The album represented a coherent artistic statement, rather than a collection of marketable singles. A body of work that told the story of who she actually was, rather than who a label had decided it could profit from. The title itself, Little Miss Jagged, was a reclamation of the nickname her fans had given her, turning what had been an audience's affectionate descriptor into her own artistic identity. The album announcement also came with something that felt genuinely earned after everything she had navigated to reach it. A UK tour headlining shows in Birmingham and London, performing original music for fans who had followed her through the gap between the AGT audition and this moment, some of them having waited 7 years to see who Courtney Hadwin was going to become when the industry stopped telling her who she was allowed to be. What does the distance between the girl who hid in school closets and the woman who headlined venues in Birmingham and London actually say about how this story should be understood? The contrasting reality. There is a pattern in how the entertainment industry processes child talent that Courtney Hadwin's story illustrates as clearly as any case in recent memory. A child does something extraordinary. The industry rushes to sign them and monetize them. The signing is framed as a gift, when it is actually a commercial transaction in which the child's extraordinary quality is the product being purchased. And then, when the industry's interests and the child's authentic development begin to diverge, the industry protects its interests and calls the result a creative difference. What Simon Cowell's label actually had in Courtney Hadwin was one of the most distinctive young voices in a generation. A blues rock instrument attached to a songwriter's sensibility, housed in a teenager from County Durham who had spent her whole life channeling impossible social anxiety into music. The thing that made her extraordinary was specific, irreplaceable, and absolutely incompatible with the pop music machinery the label tried to run her through. The label chose the machinery. Courtney lost 2 years to it. The setbacks took a severe toll on her mental health. The vocal hemorrhage in early 2025 that sparked death rumors while she was physically unable to correct them is the cruelest detail in a story full of them. The silencing of the one mechanism she had always used to survive the anxiety, forcing her to sit in silence while the internet processed a false version of her fate. Courtney Hadwin is 21 years old in 2026, alive and actively touring, with a debut album that has been received with the kind of critical respect that the label years never produced, despite all of the machinery deployed in their service. She manages her performance anxiety rather than being managed by it. She writes songs about her darkest periods rather than covering other artists' songs about experiences that have nothing to do with hers. She controls her creative output and her artistic identity in ways the psycho years never permitted. The tragedy of Courtney Hadwin is not that she died. The rumors were false. The tragedy is what the years between the Golden Buzzer and the debut album actually cost. What she built on the other side of it, independently, on her own terms, with her actual voice making her actual music for people who actually wanted to hear it, is something the entertainment industry did not give her. She built it herself, from the wreckage of everything the industry took and the things it broke in the taking. Now that you know everything the entertainment industry put Courtney Hadwin through between the Golden Buzzer and Little Miss Jagged, do you think Simon Cowell's label handled her talent responsibly? And are you going to listen to Little Miss Jagged? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.